If you can make something like this, then I can teach you how to turn it into something like this. What's good, everybody? My name is Alckemy. Welcome to the channel. Today is a production video focused on how to make IDM/hyperglitch music, and the core concept of it is taking very simple musical ideas and repurposing it or resampling it into these cool little moments that create a dynamic conversation within your music. Now, even if you're not really into glitch music in particular, you can use some of these core concepts in small snippets of your contemporary music or your more popular music in order to kind of write cool transitions or just spice up your production in general. So be sure to stick around for the entirety of the video because I'm going to be talking about the process aspect of it and elaborate on the philosophy. And if you aren't subscribed to the channel already, I would love it if you do so. Only about 50 of you guys that actually watch my content are subscribed, so help a brother out. I'm still working on that 10K, man. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the DAW and talk about how this works. So let's go ahead and break down the core tracks that I've made, or the core stems, before we actually talk about the production aspect of it. I've got 11 tracks total, and I'm just going to kind of show you how everything was put together. So the first one that we have is this complete control sound. Kind of just a reed sound. Then we've got a reverse piano. Then we've got this other piano, which sounds like this. Then we've got a clap that I made, which sounds like this. And then I made a kick. And then I've got this glitch maker that is pretty much just something that I can use to make a lot of different textures with. So it sounds like this. Then I've got a soundscape. Then I've got another texture maker, which sounds like this. And then finally, I've got a neuro bass that sounds like this. So for everything, I've provided links in the description for most kinds of sounds that you actually require sound design. But once you have everything together, then all you really want to focus on is taking the musical ideas and bouncing those to audio so that you've got stems, which sound like this. And you want to make sure that you include all of the reverb, all of those elements in there, so kind of just take everything in for what it is. Once you have that, then you create this easy little drum beat, which sounds like this. It's got a little hat. The next thing that you want to get into is going back into those generators and creating long sound clips from just random sessions that kind of sound like this. And again, you just want to bounce those to audio. Same thing with the soundscape. Then finally, you also want to do the same thing with your neuro bass. So just bounce out a long cut of randomization, so that way you've got a lot of different sounds to choose from. Once you have all the key ingredients, then it's time to kind of start putting things together. So what I did was I took the same idea that I had here with this main thing and layered everything, or kind of laid it out on to like a duplicate section later in the timeline. So really what you want to do is you want to start with your drums, or at least I think that's one of the better ways to go about. The first thing that I started doing was I just cultivated a drum loop and started placing some things kind of like this. Once I did that, because I don't have too many transients in line, the next thing that I was starting to focus on was taking some of those glitches and stuff that we made and focusing on creating a rhythm. If you are well acquainted with beatboxing, or you kind of have an ear for rhythm, then really what you do is you kind of just take, you know, specific pieces of this, maybe something kind of like this, and you start cutting things up in this way. So you can see here that for this thing, I've kind of just taken repeats and lots of stutters here and lots of pitches and stuff in order to kind of make something interesting. But one thing that I wanted to show to you is that if you focus more so on rhythmic placement as opposed to like the actual sound itself, then let's say like you're doing something right here, you can just kind of place this in this area like this. And let's say I want to do like a 4 thing like that, right? Which is kind of cool, but maybe I don't like that sound. Well, you can highlight all of these or highlight one and hit Option Command and scroll through the sample in this way, and then you can find a different hit that you might like. And then you can also play with different pitches and, you know, audio editing in that way. So once you kind of do that, you want to think about starting to fill some of the space. And we haven't really touched anything up here yet, but we'll get to that in just a second. But my thought process behind that was I've got all of this space to fill in between, so I'm focused on creating polyrhythm with those glitches and stuff. Then what I did with the second one was added a support layer that has a little bit more processing on it, which again, I've got videos on how to do all that stuff. But this in particular is going to kind of help supplement it and help kind of bridge the emptiness that you might feel from the drums. Now that we've got something kind of like that, we can kind of start coming up here and focusing on creating glitches for the musical stuff. One thing that a really cool artist taught me, his name is Fracture, is that whenever you're doing glitch cuts like this, if you have something that's constantly going, so no matter how much you break the sound, if you've got one element that's constantly going, then it will help maintain a flow to the entire tune. So the drums are always pushing forward, but also if you look right here, there's usually something that's kind of making sure that it's continuing on how to make the tune or how to kind of bring everything forward in that way. So for this, I kind of just started listening to the glitch cuts that I had, and then I started trying to create moments of highlights within this in order to be able to kind of complement those. So if you take a listen. But you can tell here that within all of this stuff, I'm not really doing anything that is that crazy or elaborate, but I'm really just kind of using certain spaces and creating certain stutters in between here while the melody still carries on. So in one place I might want to pitch it, and one place I might want to do, you know, like a different melody or something. It almost always starts with the same piece of the loop and almost ends always with the same piece of the loop. And I'm not saying that you have to do that, but that's a great way to kind of stay on task whenever you're trying to create like cool moments like this. Some of the last things that we had, I actually didn't have a sub bass, but I do have one on this that kind of is just playing along with the kind of melody that I've created. There's no chord progression on this. And then the main thing that I've added as well is taking small moments of the neurobass and just adding in little moments that I think sound good as fills. So as opposed to trying to make a whole tune out of the neurobass and call it that for what it is, I think that just small moments of the monster talking kind of helps bring everything to life in this way. So the last kind of final thoughts that I want to talk about how this came together was that I broke this off into sections. As opposed to making this work from like beginning to end in that aspect, I took everything as a cycle. So the na na na, and then that specific section is just a piece in order for me to break down and work on. And then whenever I had something like that, then I focused on moving on to the next part and then switching and rearranging that and switching and rearranging that. And then what you end up with is a really cool, diverse type of thing. Once I have about 4 phrases that I'm happy with, I duplicate it and then I make small variations in order to kind of, how do you say, in order to kind of just keep it interesting and not just be like the same loop. Because I tend to recognize patterns pretty well and pretty easily. So for me, I have to have like a lot of complexity or a lot of variation in between that. But the key to it is like you can go as crazy as you want, but if you want things to still be like musical and cohesive, which is, if you guys know my music, I usually like break that and try to go for more abstract, then having an actual melody that you can break but still moves in time and still repeats in cycles is a great way to kind of add that cohesion that you may or may not be looking for. Aside from that, there's a couple other things that I added. So just some small things, which I've got something like this, which is another soundscape layer. And that's just because this had more of the machinery that I liked, so I added that on top of here. I've got this cello that sounds like this. I recorded some guitar and pitched it down. The last thing that I want to talk about is I created a very easy intro to where I made an impact and then a reverse sample, and then I just used some of the glitch stuff here to make something interesting to get into the beat. And that's pretty much it. So hopefully with that insight, if you don't know how to cut audio and you're like, oh man, he didn't talk about that stuff, then go watch this video here and that will kind of explain how to conjure all of that stuff. But really, it's more so about the idea of repurposing content and then showing you a path of how you can do that. The little intricacies that are in between, as I've said before, have already been explained in other videos, so that gives you incentive to go watch my other stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It's really not as hard as it might seem, or doesn't really take as much work as it might look, but it's more of just having fun, of playing with the concept, and then like being your own personal manual looper. That's the best way that I can say. And then you do just a bunch of different sound design tricks and stuff in order to kind of make it more interesting. So that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you are a member, then I have the VOD from start over 2 videos that are already up that you can go watch, or you can consider becoming a member or supporting the channel just because you love me.